All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it. So let's go run through the art museum. We're going to start our next chapter, chapter 6, Etruscan art. This is a reminder. At the top of your next empty page, write chapter 6, big and bold, or you can write Etruscan art. Go to the table of contents and write this page number down next to chapter 6 in your table of contents. Also, this is a reminder that there are 5 hand-drawn sketches per chapter. All right, where is you know what? I'm going to do a brief discussion right here of the Etruscans, but the Etruscans were in Italy. Italy, the easiest country to find because it looks like a boot. All right, now at this time, if you look over here on the far right, that is Greece. And just across this short little sea right here are Greek colonies on Italy. So the lower part of Italy had Greek colonies. The Romans were in the center part, that's right around the city of Rome, and the Etruscans were in the northern part of Italy. And so they were mostly in this period, this area right here that is in the orange, where that was where the Etruscans were. You don't need to write this down. The Etruscans, though, had a similar evolution to the Greeks. The Greeks and the Etruscans had geometric and orientalizing. They had archaic, and then they had classical and Hellenistic, very similar to the Greeks. All right, so instead of running through the art museum, we are going to race through the art museum for the Etruscans. So there's only 3 works of art that we're going to discuss for the Etruscans, and one of them is their temples. Do you remember Greek temples? A Greek temple is basically like the cella surrounded, there's a couple of rooms next to the cella, and then it's surrounded by colonnades on all 4 sides. This right here is an Etruscan temple. And notice that the colonnades do not go all the way around. There is a clear facade right here in the front, and there are 3 doors because there are 3 chambers in the temple, 3 rooms. Instead of 1 cella, it has 3. And that is because they had 3 major gods. The front view, you can see there's just a couple of columns, not many. And then there is a pediment, but there's no sculpture in the pediment. There's no metopes, there's no triglyphs, there's no entablature, there's no frieze. It's a much simpler type of temple. From the side view, it's basically a room with a porch in the front of it, and that's it. There are not any temples surviving because they were mostly made of mud brick. All right, so we are going to skip past. Are you guys ready for a story time? All right. So this is the city of Alba Longa had a new king, and the king Numitor, who had been displaced by his brother Emilius, he banished the old king, and then he banished the daughter of the old king to become a Vestal Virgin. So, what is a Vestal Virgin? That is a woman in the service of the cult of Vesta. There is a goddess, her name was Vesta, and she was the goddess of virgins. And so all the people that were of the cult had to keep their virginity. And the goddess is the one who keeps the light, keeps Rome lit. And in order to keep the flame lit, you can't have sex. Well, Mars sees Rhea and he falls in love with her. And 9 months later, she has twins, which she names Romulus and Remus. Emilius locks her up and condemns the twins to death. So they tell them to kill the twins. So they put them in a basket, put them in the river, and the babies float in the river. And eventually they wash up on shore, and they are found by a she-wolf. The she-wolf nurses them to health. They are found, and then they are raised as young men. And then as when they become young men, they are told that they are the son of a king. So they go back with an army. They take back their kingdom. They kill the king who had banished their father and mother. And so then they become kings. And well, and they restore their father as the true king. Then they go and set out to build their own kingdom, Romulus and Remus. So they find nearby there's a couple of hills. There's Palatine Hill and Aventine Hill. And this is the place where the wolf raised them. And this is where they want to build their new city. The brothers fought over which hill the city should be started on. Romulus wanted Palatine Hill, and Remus wanted Aventine Hill. So they, as part of their argument, they build a barrier between them. So Romulus put a border around his hill, and Remus stepped over that hill, over that boundary. They got into a fight, and Romulus killed Remus. So then Romulus creates the city of Rome, and eventually it becomes the Rome that we know now. So that is how Rome was founded. The artwork that we're going to look at is this one right here called Capitoline Wolf. And I put this picture in here to show you how large this artwork is. So this artwork tells the story of the twins, Romulus and Remus, being raised by the wolf. It is made out of bronze. Here's a detail of it. And this right here is the Etruscan sculpture. Now, there's a controversy about this sculpture. New evidence shows that this might have been made in the medieval era. When it was restored in the 1990s, they found that the casting technique was more similar to medieval than Etruscan. But as experts argue, so not everybody agrees with that assessment, and the tests are inconclusive. At the time it was made, Rome was still new and not using the she-wolf as a symbol, which is another piece of evidence that shows that this is medieval. Now, this is the Etruscan part. The twins here were later additions to the sculpture. So the twins were not made by the Etruscans, but it was a Renaissance sculptor who made the twins to go underneath the she-wolf. So we're going to do do we have time for another story? In Greece, the king expelled his son Bellerophon from the kingdom for accidentally killing his brother during a training exercise. So he roamed aimlessly, and he came upon the city of Tiryns. The king and queen of Tiryns welcomed him in, obeying the principles of Zeus. The principles of Zeus says that when you accept somebody in, you have to be good to them. You have to be pleasant to them. So, and you have to welcome travelers in need. A ritual cleansing ceremony cleansed him of his sin of killing his brother. So now he is good with the gods. The queen, the king's wife, sees him and falls in love with him, and she tries to seduce Bellerophon. But he respectfully declined her advances in respect for the king, which made her angry. She felt humiliated and insulted, so she vowed revenge on the man that rejected her. So she told the king Bellerophon that she told the king that Bellerophon had tried to sexually assault her. Because of the rule of Zeus, he could not hurt Bellerophon. So he sent him away. He gave Bellerophon a message to deliver to Lycia, which is a king in a neighboring kingdom. And the letter says that the fool carrying this letter tried to get it on with your daughter, so kill him. And so the king welcomes him in with the same rule of Zeus that you have to welcome in travelers. And the new king did not read the message, but he has a party for the new guest. And the daughter fell in love with Bellerophon. And then once he reads it, he felt hatred for Bellerophon. But he can't do anything because of the Zeus rule. He could not harm Bellerophon. So he comes up with a plan. A monster has been killing people and cattle in the villages. He says to Bellerophon, I need somebody to kill the monster. If you kill the monster, you can marry my daughter. So Bellerophon goes out to kill the monster. He volunteered, and Athena gave Bellerophon reins to mount and control Pegasus. So Bellerophon rides Pegasus off to find the Chimera. All right, the Chimera is a beast that has a lion's body and head, a goat's head and hind legs, and then the tail is a serpent. So they have an epic battle of Bellerophon and Pegasus versus the Chimera. And eventually, Bellerophon wins. He kills the Chimera and he brings it back to the king, in which he's able to marry and have children. Much, much later, Bellerophon, he begins to get full of himself. He calls himself a god. He says, only a god can do the things that I've done. I am going to live on Mount Olympus. So he gets on a Pegasus and he goes to fly up to Mount Olympus. And Zeus says, I don't think so. So he sends a horsefly to bite Pegasus. When the horsefly bites Pegasus, Pegasus jerks and Bellerophon falls off and falls to his death. I told you that story so that I can show you this sculpture. This is an Etruscan sculpture of the Chimera. The mane is very stylized, but it has a nice motion to it. The curve of the back and the curve of the snake and the curve of the goat's head. You can see the wounds on it that are bleeding. You can see the wound in the goat's neck. I want us to look at this one because it leads us right into Roman art. All right. He is clearly a magistrate, and his posture seems to be that of an orator who is in the process of addressing the crowd. And there is a slight contrapposto pose. Do you see it? He is leaning more on one foot than the other. The right hand raises to address the crowd. So as Rome was expanding, it absorbed the Etruscan culture, politics, and economy. So, and the autonomy of the various Etruscan states eroded. The Etruscans themselves elected to adopt the trappings of Roman culture that was in turn indicative of a wider pan-Mediterranean dynamics. But what that's saying is that the Etruscans were adopting Roman culture. They were trying to look like Romans. They were trying to act like Romans. And so that's what it goes. If you can't beat them, then join them, because the Romans were much more powerful than the Etruscans. If you look closely at his feet, he's wearing the high boots that are commonly associated with Roman senators. And if you look at his haircut, that is a Roman aristocratic haircut. The Etruscans were experts in bronze casting, and he shows signs of aging, which we'll talk about when we get into the Roman art. And then his toga is inscripted. So that's how we know who he is. All right, and that will finish us for the Etruscans. All right, we not only ran past the Etruscans, we raced past the Etruscans.